John Coyne, alcoholic, grateful pavillionaire. I came to Pavilion in 2019. Um, it was one of the best choices I made because I had some options as far as places to go when I really needed help. Um, I have a pretty tame story, but hopefully the way that I tell it will be at least entertaining and you guys will be able to get something out of it because that's why I'm here. Um, so I was born and raised as a Irish Catholic altar boy in a family that did drink. So basically, I didn't have a chance in hell. Um, I was, looking back, I was set up for trouble. I was set up for addiction. Um, I was set up for obsessive behavior. I had doctors in the family. Um, there were a lot of expectations, not even so much put on myself as I put on myself. So I was a late bloomer. I was skinny, red-haired kid, 6'1", 140 pounds on my driver's license. So the ladies weren't necessarily calling my home phone. So I was able to be a good student through high school. And right around, I would say, 15, um, after my parents had been divorced for a couple years, and I had sort of let that sink in. Now, of course, divorce is pretty common. It's about half and half. Um, Mine was a little more unique because I've had some time to look back on it. And, you know, there was some cheating involved, which made the split. Unfortunately, I was forced to choose which house we were going to stay at the age of 11 or 12. So it was an emotional time. I'll never forget it. And I have an older brother, and I was still the one that had to make the choice. So it caused a lot of guilt in that decision that I made. And I had to get used to a stepfather and a stepmother and balancing that. And there was a lot of emotion and fighting. And I felt like, as I look back, the easiest way and the most expedient way to numb any sort of pain was to get out of my own head, was to cover up my thoughts with a substance. And of course, like I said, there was alcohol around the liquor cabinet, there was beer. Um, my dad would ask me to go to his bedroom to get his Marlboro Reds off the dresser. So it was all under my nose, literally. So I took a Miller Lite old school can into the basement when I was 15 and forced it down, and it was just disgusting. But I remember kept drinking that thing because I wanted to see how I would feel. I wanted to see how different I would be after that. Like it would transform me, and it would take away all this pain and anxiety. I hung out with friends who accepted me, who were a little bit out on the edge, sort of like me. They were kind of into sports, but also okay academically, but also had divorced parents. What do you know? So I smoked weed for the first time, and what it did to me was put a gel over my vision of the world, and it was wonderful. And I had cupcakes smeared all over my face, and these are vivid moments for me, but these formed in my brain as ways to cope with my emotions. And I became very isolated with marijuana and alcohol. And I more and more wanted to be alone with that rather than the people that I was doing it with. And when I went to college, um, again, late bloomer, and I was held back. So I was 17 when I went to college. I'm feeling like I just can't catch up. And you know what? Screw it. Like, I am not only 1 or 2 years. I feel like I'm 3 or 4 years behind people in my class. So I kind of throw my hands up and say, I'm just going to go with it and get drunk. And I was able to do it, as a lot of people in college were. Um, but I would order a case of beer from the guy in the hall, put the sheets down like flaps under my bunk bed, and just put a Walkman on, and when we had Walkmans back then, uh, and just go to town. And that's where it started for me. Was really freshman year, becoming a professional drinker, um, and the blackouts would be sporadic, but I learned how to deal with being a drunk. And under the guise of, well, you're in college and you're young, and this is what people do. What I didn't know is when I graduated, I was such a mess that I had no motivation and no idea, because of the things that had happened previously in my life. So it was kind of like a snowball, which led to more indecision, which led to more drinking. Uh, so I would work various jobs after graduating, and the drinking, cunning, baffling, certainly powerful, was slowly getting stronger in terms of how often I would drink, and the blackouts would become more often. Uh, I was drinking and driving. I was not the best person to share a bed with after I'd been drinking. We'll put it that way. Um, and I just became worse. And I was not happy with the person I became. I became a mean drunk. And I remember looking back at times in college when I would hang out with friends, and right before we started drinking, I remember being a nice, intelligent, funny person who was quick. And then as soon as I had those two, it just numbed me, and it made me conform, and it made me go along. And God forbid I go to a dry school. I mean, we would laugh at those kids. We don't want to be conforming to that, and to be, whatever goes along with that. I mean, we want to be normal. We want to drink. And little did I know, it was planting a seed for, you know, pretty bad alcoholism. I was a pretty high bottom drunk as it goes, because, I was taken to jail for DUI. Um, I was miserable at my job, and the relationships were available, but I wasn't 100% invested, and the women knew that. Um, I didn't stand a chance there, so I would I would continue to drink. And I remember I found a bar, much like a Cheers, where everybody knew my name and felt very comfortable. And I'm in my early 30s, and I'm still feeling that feeling of, I don't really know what I want to do with my life. But alcohol is very, very comfortable, and it became my best friend. And I became someone who would drink as soon as I was out of work, and I would sometimes miss the next day because I was so hungover or still drunk. And that was the worst, is when I was still drunk. It was great in my mind, because then what would I do the next morning to continue the party? Is go back to the bar. I would be at the bar as a 31-year-old man waiting for the owner to open up for me, in complete denial, because, again, under the guise of, this is funny, this is a joke, this is what we do to deal with life. I was watching the movie 28 Days with Sandra Bullock, and her boyfriend in the movie was talking about, to paraphrase, that basically, life sucks and people get by in different ways. And drinking is one of them. So I had myself convinced that, sitting at the bar, I remember thinking, kind of a moment of clarity, This is my life, and it's not terrible. It could definitely be better, but this is what I'm going to do. This is what I choose to do. I've never killed anyone or spent a long time in prison or, really lost a family member yet. And still, I was really struggling with finding any kind of happiness outside of Fireball or Bud Light. And it transformed me into a very isolated person, not the person that I am now. And the person I am now, I never thought I would be. I got to a point 2.5 years ago where I felt like I didn't have any friends. I had isolated and shut myself off. I had done that myself. And I remember thinking, I'm so depressed and I don't work out. I don't do anything. I just work for that next high or, that next 12 pack or case. And it felt like no one was calling me. That's more ego and selfishness in there. No one was reaching out to me to ask how I was. And that was sort of the end of it for me. And I remember going to a bar and I would start a couple of fights. And I went downtown here in Wilmington and I had left my car, as I tended to do probably the last 5 years of inebriety on a regular basis, where I would black out probably after 10 p.m. every night that I would drink. And I would lose my keys, my wallet, my cell phone. One of the three, I'd find a way to lose them. And I was doing this on a regular basis. Again, denial said to me, "This is funny. You lost your car." There's a movie of that, dude, or where's my car? So I'd find a way to entertain myself and be like, well, this is just what people do. Again, so thick in denial at that point, so stubborn, so prideful that I still didn't know, I still didn't wake up. So I was in such bad shape that when I was hungover, I just felt like I was a shell. I wasn't really hungry. I didn't want to drink, but I was just almost like a ghost in this town. And I had to go to a local restaurant to use their phone because I had lost my cell phone, to call a cab company who could take me to my car, and I'd pay them when I found it because I didn't have a wallet. The cab driver picks me up, drives me downtown. I've got my keys, the one thing that I did have with me, which I found in my couch, I think. And I was hitting the keyless entry, driving around downtown, beep, 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 looking for it. And I found it. And he pulls over and he goes, "People like you scare the hell out of me." And I'll never forget that, because I kind of, at the time, I laughed it off and I said, "Yeah, I'm sure. I blacked out and left my car. At least I didn't, whatever." He's just like, "Fine." So that was one of the last times that I really, something stuck with me that I did when I was drunk. And eventually I got to the point where I was in my apartment and I texted my family. I said, "I'm not necessarily going to kill myself, but you may not hear from me for a while." And um, my dad drove from Maryland in the middle of the night and, found me passed out on the couch. Luckily, the door was open. And I'll never forget how grateful I was that he made that effort. And we talked from what I remember. And then, he made sure I was okay and he spent the night. And the next day, he called a mobile crisis person to come over and give me an assessment. And along with, he got about 5 egg McMuffins to sober me up. But the mobile crisis person gave me an evaluation, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm ready. Like, this is enough. This is ridiculous. Like, I'm making the choice as of that moment. So they referred me to a place called Coastal Horizons, and I called because I'm in sales, and you know, I thought I knew how to talk to people. I've been doing it for 15 years. Left messages, and I'm like, I am in such a bad place. This outpatient place doesn't even want to deal with me. And I'm like, what do I have to do? I almost left a voicemail saying like, dude, like, do you guys want my, like, I'll pay you if I can come there and you take care of me and tell me what to do. How's that? Like, I'm a good student. Like, I'm a good patient. I'll do it. Nobody called me back. So I had seen a counselor here a few times, and she referred me to Pavilion. I'll put it that way. And when I had started seeing her, probably 6 years before, so before I sobered up, before I went to Pavilion, when I talked to this therapist, she gave me homework, and she said, "This week, I don't want you to buy any alcohol." I think about that too, and I just kind of said, "This is what I'm paying for. Like, this is ridiculous. That's not a problem." And I made it all the way to Friday, and I bought a bottle of wine. And this is what I hope everyone can understand, if nothing else, is that how insane we are, is that, and how denial and how tricky this stuff is because I, all the way up until Friday, was cool and was like, I can do this. It's not a big deal. And then I said to myself, but it's just wine. And I drank the bottle of wine, and I was like, well, it's just a bottle. And then I, went to bed. I was like, that's not a big deal. But in the back of my mind, I still remember feeling like I had failed. And and that's when the denial had started to, I started to feel the denial. Started to, as we tend to do as alcoholics, we were aware. So she referred me to Pavilion, and for whatever reason, I just felt like it was the right place. And I felt like, as I've told people looking back, Pavilion in Wilmington was like a shelter during a hurricane. And it's no longer there, not because of a hurricane, but I guess because of funding or whatever. But it probably saved my life. If not, it saved me from being miserable because it gave me 8 weeks of structure, and the way that I was able to just come in and already knowing like this is the path I'm on, help me out. Like, I'll do whatever you say. And this is the best part. We had a family, uh, you know, weekend, and my parents came up, and we were watching this video, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he was in a high school auditorium, and made it through the whole video. My parents are sitting there, and the 3 or 4 other people there with me, as part of the outpatient. And the guy in the video just says, you made it, you're here. And it just, ooh, it just hit me like a shotgun. And I just got hot, and then I just had to go into the other room, and I just cried for like 3 minutes in the bathroom. And I told Corey, the therapist at the time, I was like, that just felt like the biggest sneeze that I was holding on to for um, 25 years. And I just let it all out, and I looked in the mirror, and I looked different, and I felt different. And that's when we're men. Like, a lot of us are men. We're in recovery. We're not supposed to talk. We're not supposed to feel. We're not supposed to, that stuff is changing, or at least for people who want to feel better. Because I remember, now that I've been to a number of AA meetings, we talk about anonymity, and people are afraid to say their names, afraid to admit they're alcoholics, but we have no problem peeing ourselves in a public place and making a complete fool of ourselves. But coming to our first meeting, and when the wave comes around and they say, it's your turn. I say, hi, I'm John. And they say, hi, John. And then they go to the next person. I was so afraid to admit that I was an alcoholic, and it really freaked me out. But when I went to Pavilion, it was just, it felt like a second home. And it got me into yoga, which I've been doing for 2+ years. Massage was a part of it then, which I'll go do sometimes. Um, and the PEMS check in. So I've become a lot bigger into self care um, over the couple, 2.5 years. I'm stubborn. They advised me to do 90 in 90 days. Not for me. I'm the only one that doesn't need that. Of all the millions of alcoholics out there, I can do one a week. So what I did was, I think I was okay, but I just could have achieved a little more in a shorter time had I done that. So of course they're going to recommend that, which is it's recommendable. Um, I am obviously clearer. I've lost weight. I go to the gym now, and I just did an hour of stretching before this. Now maybe it's because I'm officially old, uh, and I was afraid to be someone who stretches. But when your body starts talking to you, I was telling a friend, you know, I feel like I woke up and the scales lifted from the eyes and I was old and sober. So it's like I'm the mentality of an 18-year-old, but the body of a whatever. So I have to catch up to that and be like, all right, you got to stretch. But all that stuff, meditation, I started doing transcendental meditation, um, anything to get me out of my head. And one thing Pavilion was good for is bluntly stating what the tools are that you need when you're out there and things get real. Going to meetings and talking to people. When, especially men, again, I say, when you're not feeling like anyone wants to listen to you. Nobody wants to listen to my story. I mean, I don't have much to complain about. Like life has been pretty easy, but maybe what they need is someone to call them. And I got my 2-year chip, and they said, "How'd you do it?" And I said, yoga, AA, and Krispy Kreme, and that's true, and I recommend it. But again, you got to watch out for the sugar. I found that out. And it's just after that, it's just been trial and error for me. And there's been, looking back the first 6 months, there's a lot of emotion. And for me, I wanted to say that when you're 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, wherever you're at, 5 days, I was under the assumption that when you hit a year, that you're just good and you made it. And it's not that life is just, continues to be awful. It's just, it's continues to be work. And Caroline from the one from the location here, she said, reminded me that, work is the easiest way to get through it. Like I had to pound that into my head and just be like, start making a list. What are you doing today? You're going to work, you're going to do yoga, you're going to go for a walk, you're going to play golf. You got to do something. And I still am guilty of staying in the apartment or the condo and, letting neighbors drive me crazy, pounding up and down the stairs. And I'll even put in my phone, like, what do you have to do today? You have to stretch and you have to get out of the house. So these things sound simple, but it's easier to get sucked into our obsessive sort of compulsions and rely on our minds to get us out of the trouble. When I'm okay with calling people, and that's been the biggest thing for me, is to say, hey, how are you? And when I was really spun out about a year in, sideways, bugs are crawling on me, however you want to put it, The sponsor told me to call 3 people, and I called 3 people. Well, guess what? Nobody answered. But then one of them called me back, and that's all I needed. And then after you talk for a half hour, it's like you start listening to them and their kids and their ex-wife, and I'm like, I got it pretty good. So, um, it's work, but you can make it easier by doing the tools that they gave us. And I've I've just gotten onto the 12th step with my grand sponsor because he is tough. Like he is, he's old school and tedious, and we're reading the big book, and I'm 2 paragraphs down, and I'm getting to the point like I'm waiting for him to stop me. Jon, what does that make you think about? And I'm like, oh my God, like we're almost done. Let me just get through this. But there was something missing. I could tell up until when I made amends. And then when I started giving back, because you got to give it away to keep it. And that's what I didn't quite get until I started feeling better completely by doing things like this, doing service work. And this is what I'm comfortable doing, is talking and letting you guys hear, um, hopefully some things that will get you through, um, and some things that will maybe inspire you, because my sponsor told me that it was a miracle that I was picking up chips. And I believe it, because I was going the wrong way fast, and I was able to hit the brakes and just say, what are you doing? Like, it can only get better than where you're going. So let's move that way. So I appreciate you guys listening. And like I said, I'm in a space now where it really does um, increase my self-esteem to do esteemable acts. So that's what we're doing here.